Hey everyone, and welcome back to Drawing Somewhat Slower, the counterpart to Drawing Too Fast, where I take the time to actually explain what it is I'm doing instead of just flying through that at pretty close to the speed of light. So I'm working on, this time around, another prompt video, and this one was specifically Tree of Life. So don't know how I landed on this one. I knew I wanted to do a tree thing, just to be a little obvious. And at some point, the idea of doing a cat popped into my head, and as I played around a little bit, I ended up settling on cat chilling out under a bonsai tree. And what we're watching right now, or what we have been watching for a little bit here, was the inking process with a brush, which is the first one of these videos that I've done with the brush. I hadn't done a lot of inking with the brush until October of 2017, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. The marker gives me a little more control over line width, but the brush tends to feel a lot more natural, and you can see throughout there that I was able to get nice differing line weights. The fur was a really nice one to do with the brush there. And again, just like in other videos, there I am taking the pencil lines back out. I did darken the background a little bit with just kind of an off-white, creamish, tannish tone because I wanted to get rid of that stark background there, just so like the cat's fur could stand out. Alright, so moving on here, I'm actually just laying in like a base coat for his spots there, so I can get an idea where the colors are going to be, and just go through and again with the brush add in a few more splotches here and there. I didn't have those planned out when I started because I just didn't, and what I wanted to do was be able to give them a like make it feel organic, so I just did it as I went. The pattern on the pot here is just sort of a generic geometric pattern. You'll see in a bit that I come back and color that. I wish I would have done it differently. I wish I would have colored these after I did the coat of the first coat of paint, because, you know, watercolors. Catnips, yay. Talk about the tree again. I did this whole thing in stages, the tree, the cat, the whole painting, because I spent a lot of time. The piece is big, so I had to sort of bounce around and patchwork. It's not as categorically methodical as I would probably have worked otherwise. I had to wait for bits to dry. I had to work in stages so that things wouldn't smudge. Like with the tree here, I had to go in and lay in layers one at a time so I could get these different shadows without muddying up the colors that I laid down before that. And I actually had a lot of fun doing this tree, even though it did take a little longer because I had to do it that way. It was very textured, and I don't normally work in textures in traditional media. I do a lot in digital, and those are easier to play with. You can just drop stuff down. There's always the Control Z button hanging out there. But the lumpy tree was fun to play around with. More spots here, still doing flat stuff. And here I'm actually laying in the black spots. This was interesting. This is not paint. These are just light black ink washes. Like, I watered down some black ink to lay in the grays because I don't have any black watercolor. I don't know that that's a thing. It's got to be a thing. I mean, it's a color. But I did a lot of that during Inktober, so I was sort of more familiar with the process than I was even a year ago. And I like the way it turned out. It's like, it's subtle, it sits in there nice, and it's a nice contrast to the orange. Again, back to the tree, this is where I started actually getting some green into that brown to work on. You'll see some moss later on, but I wanted to start a base with that green so I could get in here with the brighter greens like this and be able to like have it distinguished without just being like, oh look, I threw some green on top of some brown, big deal. So I wanted it to be layered in there so it looked more natural. And again, this is super fun. This particularly lumpy little bonsai tree was like very entertaining to paint. And honestly, I like how the moss turned out on these. I just basically barely wet my brush and sort of jammed it around in the pasty paint to lay it on there really thick. That's almost using the watercolor like gouache or tempera paint. The leaves, the general foliage of the tree, that was an interesting task because I wanted it to be dimensional without being Crayola, and we'll talk about that when I get back to it. The stripes on the cat, actually, like, I just sort of had that idea. I don't know, I've never painted tabby stripes, and they came out well. I'd probably do it a little differently if I had a chance to refine it, but I like how they look, and, you know, they came out well. They were fun to do. This whole piece was fun. Overall, that was like a spur-of-the-moment idea that I'm glad worked out the way it did, because I could have really just sort of garbaged the whole thing up. Laying in the ink spots here, it's not very accurate. There's not really a lot of splotchiness to a lot of the dark spots on the calicos, but I enjoyed it. He's got little cow prints, and I like it. Alright, the foliage here, this was an interesting one because I wanted to get dimension to the color without it looking like school markers, without just looking kind of ugly. So you'll see throughout this that I've gone back in, and I'm working from light to dark, putting layers in so you have like light behind the tree, and then maybe filtering through the darker leaves, just so that it's not just one color done, bleh. And I'm not afraid to, right here, I tried to keep myself being afraid to go over the branches I'd already done. There wasn't so much water going back down in this paint to like re-wet it and start it flowing on the paper again. So I hope that it just gives the impression that there's things sitting in front of those branches as opposed to just sitting around it. Now again, here I went through and I did the purple shadow trick. It actually looks really nice on the cat here because he has so many white spots, and the purple sits nicely with the gray, and so it looks good. It looks better than it did in some of the other pieces because it stands out, and it stands out in a subtle way. Again, more dark spots and moss here, and I went back in and gave his little cat nipples a highlight because I thought they looked a little too pale. And yeah, here's the last layers going on, the finishing touches. I'm just upping the contrast because as I get towards the end of these paintings, I always feel like they look a little flat. So I'm going in and I add darker leaves, darker edges. I'm darkening up the tone in the background, maybe throwing in some highlights on the actual foliage, just so that the whole thing pops a little more. Like, I've got the basic things in, I've got all that detail work done, and there's always room for a little bit of polish at the end of these things, so you just feel better about what it is you've done. Alright everyone, that was it. Here it is. Here's the cat and the bonsai tree for the Tree of Life prompt, and I know you didn't get to see me take the tape off the edges here. That will come up in another video because it did not go as smoothly as I wanted to, and that's sort of a running theme with the things I do. So keep an eye out for that video when it does show up. As always, I really enjoyed doing this, and I'd love to do more, so let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know anything you'd like me to talk about when I'm talking through these. Any topics you'd like me to focus on, any questions you'd like me to try and answer. I can't guarantee, but I will do my best. Thanks for watching. Keep an eye on the channel. Like and subscribe if you're into that sort of thing, but meh. And if you want to get some in-between stuff when I'm not making videos for you, be sure to check out my Instagram at terminal.lazy, same as the channel name, but with a little dot there in the middle. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.